My name is Agnes. I want to tell you a story about me and my brother and what I've learned about healing the divide that so many of us are feeling right now, especially in our own families and communities. First, let me tell you about my family. I am a proud first-generation Vietnamese American. My parents were refugees, boat people who were able to come to the U.S. because of the social programs in place at that time and the loving care of one ordinary church community that took care of us for years after we arrived. I was the first person in my family to go to college and then graduate school. I went overseas, served in the Peace Corps as a volunteer, and then started my career internationally. For the last 15 years, I have fought and advocated for the needs of those neglected by broken systems and worked on issues like supporting survivors of human trafficking and domestic violence. I come from a very loving family who has suffered a lot of trauma because of the war. My parents went through it, but as a family, we still feel the effects of it now, every day. Thankfully, over the years, I've seen my family heal and better their lives. And although we've received government support through the earlier years of my life, we were on welfare, I received college financial aid, we all worked really hard to improve our lives and succeed here in the country that has given us so much. So when I see these programs, the same programs that help me and my family, threatened by choices that our politicians are making, I consider it a call to action. So fast forward to a few months ago, when I started to see messages on my Facebook feed from family members supporting politicians who I think are not protecting these programs. People, if I'm being really honest, that I considered the other side. Over time, week by week, that circle started to close in nearer and nearer to me. It was my aunt and uncle who I was very close with growing up. And then about a month ago, I started receiving messages from my brother, who up until this point has never been political, sharing with me videos that played a role in his rather sudden switch from one party to the other. My brother and I, we love each other, but we don't talk about serious stuff. We talk about our kids. He likes to golf and fish. He gets uncomfortable and goes quiet whenever I tell him I love him. His wife often has to chime in on his behalf. Pretty typical brother-sister stuff. But we've always had a loving respect for one another. Sadly, in these recent months, his small business had to close down due to the COVID pandemic, and he and his family almost lost everything. And it was then that I started to receive these videos from him, and he would ask me what I thought. And honestly, I would just watch a couple of minutes and then feel sick to my stomach. So I kept putting off watching the videos and stuck with what I knew, which was debating the facts. And I spent hours researching and fact-checking things to eventually send him. I thought if I could just explain to him what I've learned in my education and career, I could convince him. I took to this task like someone working on a graduate thesis. Last week, he sent me some fake news that I fact-checked and sent back to him. And if I'm being really honest, I felt a little angry at him for not knowing that it was fake. And as I pushed him on this, I went too far. Again, I was dead set on convincing him. In retrospect now, I can see how that need to convince looked like I was talking down to him, which I believe is always wrong. Of course, we got into an argument, the first one probably in our entire adult lives. Some not so nice words were exchanged. He told me I was out of touch and I cared more about people overseas than understanding my own family. And that cut me deeply. And I defended to him that I was a good person that cared about my family and country and laid out all the evidence of why that was. I was devastated. I just felt like I was losing my whole family and now even my own brother. And I felt like my family didn't know me at all or understood what I believed in or stood for, and that they, my own family, were becoming the people that I fought against my whole life. I felt sick to my stomach, and I couldn't sleep for a couple of days, and I didn't know how to process it all. Then one night at 3 a.m. as I laid awake, I finally mustered the courage to watch all the videos that my brother sent me. I sat in my bed, absorbing them for over 5 hours that night, watching, rewinding, absorbing. And what I thought I would find is an ugly rhetoric of angry voices, which a lot of it was. But when I was done, the strangest thing happened. I actually felt better. Now let me tell you why. Looking back, I realized that I didn't want to watch these videos because I was scared of what I would find. That my brother that I loved so much wasn't a good person, or that he was knowingly supporting something hateful. But the more I listened to him and absorbed his world, the more I started to realize that he was trying to communicate something important to me. He was trying to tell me that he and so many other people in this country have been hurting, and that many in my own party and people like me were unknowingly contributing to that pain. A light bulb just went off for me, and I realized that there was something more fundamental going on here, beyond all of the noise, the fake news, or politics, something more human. Something that both sides, both liberal and conservative, are doing that is causing pain for one another. And that thing we are doing is telling and believing single stories about each other. What do I mean by this single story? I first learned about this concept in a TED Talk by the novelist Chimamanda Adichie, The Danger of a Single Story. And basically, this is what it means. Think of all the different stories we have that make us who we are. Within me is a story of a mother, a daughter, a refugee, an American, an Asian American. I am all of those things. And I could have the story of being gay, of having mental illness, of serving in the military, or I might carry within me the story of a rape survivor. We carry all of these stories together, and that is the richness of who we are. It is something to be respected. But how would I feel if one by one someone crossed out each of these stories on my list until there was only one story left? Or even worse, what if someone gives you a single story that is not even yours? For us to be defined by one thing, one story robs us of the beautiful messiness we possess in our hearts and live with every day. The messiness we all feel shy about and sometimes ashamed of, but our spouses lovingly shrug off and our cat doesn't seem to mind at all. I think we all know how it feels to be labeled and to be put in a box, to be misunderstood. It is painful. But that is what we are all doing to one another on both sides every day. Some folks say liberals are baby killers and communists and that they hate God and freedom. These are simplistic, single stories that rob us of our individuality. Conservatives have the single story of being the racist, angry. They all love guns and violence. And it doesn't matter if any of it is true. What matters is that the single story is always incomplete. It is only one sliver of who people really are. And I believe that defining people by this one thing is an act of aggression. Labeling somebody with a single word like racist and ignoring the complexity of their being might as well be a fist to the chin. It is hurtful and it's not going to get you anywhere good. These single stories dehumanize us all and make us feel less than who we are. It robs us of our dignity and humanity. So what do we do about this problem? I used to work with women who survived serious trauma from violence and abuse, and I've been so blessed to see many of their journeys from their darkest moments through to healing and empowerment. And what I've learned from them is this. With wholeness comes healing. Wholeness is the feeling that you are truly being seen, respected, and treated with dignity, and that you are loved for your whole self and all of your identities and stories, warts and all. This is how we feel close to each other again, and this is the remedy for the single story. And part of the journey to wholeness is telling our stories and having someone truly listen to our stories. That is why I felt better after I watched the videos and truly listened to my brother. I absorbed his story and I empathized with him. Empathy. It's something that we are lacking so much of these days. I saw that my brother was a good-hearted person who tries really hard. He cares about others and wants to see this country heal. And once I saw this, I also realized how I also inflicted pain by telling my own single story about him. It took us both to have a breakdown and a fight to realize this about one another and to reconnect the love that we have as brother and sister. So I know what many of you may be thinking. How about the fake news and the corrupt system, the manipulation that is happening? Yes, this is all happening. There are powers out there that deliberately want us to keep telling single stories about each other because it keeps us disconnected and angry, and most importantly, distracted. Single stories are like candy, an easy sell, but not a good diet to live on. In fact, the more we eat, the sicker we all become. We need to find a way to stop the single story and cut through all of the noise, and we cannot wait for someone to do this for us. We must take control of our story as a country and heal this divide ourselves as Americans together. It's the only way we can return to decency and live in a society of mutual respect and love for one another. And I think I know how we can start. We all know somebody on the other side, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, a liberal or a conservative. It could be your neighbor, a friend, your brother or sister, your mom or dad. I encourage you to set a time to talk. And during this talk, try something. Agree to have only one goal, to listen to one another. And I know it's hard to do, as so many of us are in pain right now. The urge to stand up for yourself, to fight back, is so strong. And there is a time for that. But I'm asking you now to just take a deep breath and commit to the goal of just listening. Don't try to convince each other of anything at this time. Just listen, ask questions, and try to understand. If you want to have a follow-up talk later and debate points, that is fine. But for this first conversation, just focus on this simple goal. It's difficult to do, but really pretty simple. Just listen and see what happens. I promise you that this simple act of listening and truly hearing one another is powerful. I know that people think that listening and acknowledging other people's pain will add to our own pain or weaken our resolve. But that's the secret. It doesn't. It's actually what softens our hearts and gives us strength. It restores wholeness and connection. It's the beginning of healing. And we all need to do this for ourselves and one another. So let's stop the single story and restore wholeness to ourselves and our country.